I'm going to pass the baton now to Lee, who's going to be talking to us about what mass care is all about.
Thank you, Linda. Hi, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to share some information today. There's three things that I hope that the council takes away from my share today, and that is that you're better informed
Mm.
and that you're able to continue to provide energy toward emergency preparedness. And last, that the share generates some questions and discussion. I really liked what Mayor said at the beginning of this, that this was going to be a discussion, and I hope it is. And if not today, that the council can take time and devote some energy to continuing these discussions. And on that note, I also like very much what Commissioner Nuttall said, Councilor Nuttall said about the need to practice. His fire department wasn't successful because people read about it and believed they knew what was going on. It was successful because they drilled regularly. And I'm sure that Chief Bestwick's folks do that as well. So that's the key. I want to make clear that I'm not an expert on mass care. I like to think of myself as a student of mass care and preparedness. And I hope that somehow or another that we can all think about being a student of mass care and preparedness and continue to learn and be more resilient individually and as a community. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing today, a little bit about just some general information sharing and some concepts and hopefully an opportunity for some specific questions. So this is something that does a lot here in Manzanita in a normal year. Obviously, that's not happening right now, but we can hope to reduce the fire season events and likelihood that we'll be getting some of this moisture. And I'm going to kind of focus today on Cascadia. That's the name that seismologists have for this fault off our coast. And the reason being that if we can prepare emotionally and physically for Cascadia, we can be prepared for anything. So while this kind of focuses on the big event, we could be dealing with fires or maybe a more local event such as the tornado that occurred a few years ago. So here's the setup, folks. 2 years from this coming October at 1:30 in the morning, and of course it's going to be windy and rainy. And I just want you to listen for a little bit. Here's a little audio for you to kind of set the tone. So bear with me. So if you're not squirming just a little bit, you're not human. So here's what happened. We've got a massive 8.6 Cascadia earthquake 2 miles west of Tillamook, and the quake's only 1/2 mile deep. If any of you don't know what that means, it means that the intensity is likely to be very large and a significant amount of damage, resulting in a significant tsunami. And the shaking continues for over 6 minutes. Seismologists tell us that a major Cascadia event would likely have shaking in excess of 6 minutes. That's what happened in Japan in 2011. That was a 6-minute event. People would have less than 10 minutes to seek high ground, and the resulting tsunami takes out 150 homes in Manzanita. All power is disrupted and aftershocks continue through the night. You know, that Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand also in 2011, curiously enough, that they had aftershocks for 6 to 8 years afterwards that were related to that particular event. So something to be mindful of, at least initially, that if everything looks safe because it wasn't a major event, that it's likely to continue for some time afterwards. So daylight reveals that Highway 101 is not passable in any direction. Water and sewer are inoperable. By the way, about the Highway 101, the ODOT tells us that after a major seismic event, that it's almost certain that there will only be one route in our area going east-west, and that's Highway 18 down out of Lincoln City. So 6 is gone, 26 is gone, Highway 30 is gone, and there's literally no way to get into the valley or for anybody from the valley to get to us except for air or water. So we got no sewer and water, 250 homes uninhabitable, 400 people are assembled at Underhill with nothing. That doesn't count the 600 that are going to be there that were prepared enough to at least have a go bag with them. So rain slows, sunshine rules the day, and there's an example about what I'm referencing in regards to Highway 101. Obviously, this isn't 101, but it's a representative example. Even the Tillamook Railway is impassable. Tsunami debris would be significant, and it would extend all the way up and down the coast of Oregon, Washington, and Northern California, and come inland to the point of the high water mark. So you want to avoid that area at all costs. The first responders I have pictured here, obviously not first responders, or are they? They may be the only people who are able to be available to help somebody in need. We don't know who those people are going to be. Could be you or me, may not be anybody. So think about that in regards to your preparation. So who assumes responsibility for care? That's a really good question. And it's something that I don't think any of us can answer because of the significance of any event. That responsibility certainly lies on yourself and your family. And at some point, there will be help, but till help arrives, you got to rely on your own resilience and that of your family. What resources are available? Maybe none. Where will people be safe? I can't answer that. I don't know. But again, a question worth thinking about as you consider emergency preparedness. Will people have food and water? Only what they've got available or what the city and surrounding agencies are able to supply to help those that don't have any. How will help arrive? Don't know. It might not be readily available, might be some time. When will services be restored? In a Cascadia event, the expectations are that services as we know it may not be available for years. It's that much of a concern. But again, while I'm focusing on Cascadia, I want you to realize that you need to be prepared for that power outage like 2007 that lasts for 10 or 12 days. When will people be evacuated? Don't know. With the limited opportunities for road travel, that may be, again, water or air may be the only way in and out. And it may be sometime, as Linda mentioned a moment ago, the resources are going to be directed to the valley where there are more people. It's just a natural phenomena that most of the available resources are going to go to where most of the people are, and we're going to be isolated, really, really isolated. So sheltering can be really difficult. especially when you're just trying to take care of yourself immediately after an event, and none of those services or supplies are available to the public other than those that they brought themselves. So what is mass care? It's a number of things. It's initially the city's responsibility as our local government agency to be responsible for providing assistance to displaced, injured families following a disaster. I think that's been made clear both by Linda in her opening statements and also the chief, that the city's got to take that responsibility. And a mass care also refers to a wide range of support services when citizens or visitors are unable to care for their basic needs. Wide range. Well, how do you get to wide range? You get to wide range with planning and effort and money. And money we know is in short supply. So we can do the planning part. When I say we, I'm referencing the city in this case. They can do the planning part, and they can do the support piece, except for the financial piece, which is a really slow process. This might be a good time to mention, for those of you that don't know, that the city of Manzanita has been setting aside fairly substantial amounts of money every year for the past 5 years. And there's currently $50,000 in their coffers to supply emergency equipment, supplies for the community. Layla has invited me back next month to talk to you specifically about some supplies that might be useful and helpful to the community. So, and as Chief Bestwick pointed out, the disaster response begins and ends at the community level. What does that mean? That means that the city takes over the responsibility after an event, and that stays with them, even though they may be coordinating outside resources, but their response is critical, and it's local, and it's immediately here in the community. So I've already used a bunch of acronyms, and I hope if I skipped over the definition of some of those acronyms, I must apologize. But in this case, it was so large of an acronym and so much information, I thought it was best to actually write this down for your edification. So OSSPAC, Oregon Seismic Safety Policy Advisory Committee, was formed as an arm of the Oregon Emergency Management in 2018. Actually, it was formed prior to that, I'm sorry. But the particular information that follows here came out of a document that they prepared in 2018, specifically for and dealing with Cascadia. This is about a 45 or 50-page document, and it relied upon resources and technical information from experts in seismology, as well as mass care experts from the entire region. And I think these bullet points are really critical. They're things that you should really think about in regards to resiliency, preparedness, and response. The Oregon coast faces monumental mass care challenges. That alone is significant and kind of frightening. Monumental. Local emergency response may be 3 days. So in talking to Chief the other day, I asked him about how long it would be before his people could get to the station, barring roads that were open and free for passage. And he said, you know, it might be 3 days before any of my people can even show up here at the station. So just to give you an idea of the significance and the what an impact that something like that would have on our community and our first responders. Local response may be limited for up to 2 weeks. So somebody may show up, but is that going to be enough to take care of everybody's needs? No, probably not. It's going to be limited for some time. Outside resources to the coastal region may be 3 weeks. This is all straight out of that manual that OSSPAC developed. Oregon Emergency Management, that's OEM, is not prepared to deal with Cascadia. They freely admit that. And just for what it's worth, I just want to mention that just this last week, the Oregon Emergency Management is preparing to become the Oregon Department of Emergency Management, which means they will be under the direct authority of the governor and they will answer to the governor. Current Oregon Emergency Management is under direction from the National Guard and the State Police. So that's going to change and give them more authority to operate independently of other agencies. OEM staffing is inadequate to reduce vulnerability. They just don't have enough people. Stable funding is needed for core resilience efforts. So again, it comes back to the dollar. Increasing community resilience is the best solution to resolve mass care throughout the state. Increasing community resilience. How do we do that? Practice, practice, practice. Take the opportunity to be involved in emergency preparedness, take the opportunity to participate in classes and organizational training. State and local communities must rely on non-governmental organizations. There are several in the area that might participate in that. The Emergency Volunteer Corps is one, near and dear to Linda's heart. Non-governmental organizations are expected to play roles in disaster response. This is straight out of OSSPAC. They're expected to play roles. And I want to be clear, what the chief said earlier is really important. He doesn't want a bunch of volunteers showing up at the fire station to try and assist with their efforts, because they need to function as a unit without outside distraction. But there's still roles that non-governmental organizations can play. So CERT is a community emergency response team. MRC is a medical reserve corps. Both of those are arms elements within EVCNB. Currently, I think you'll all be happy to hear this. Currently, there are 55 fully trained CERTs in the city of Manzanita. And currently, this is remarkable to me, Medical Reserve Corps, 25 people in the city limits of Manzanita who have been or are currently involved with as a medical professional. That means they have a license to practice either as a doctor or a registered nurse or a nurse practitioner. I think that's a remarkable achievement for a community of this size. This could be local life after Cascadia. We could end up with, I think about driving through Portland and Seattle and what a depressing scenario it is to witness all these folks that are camped along the sides of the road. And yet reality says if we have some type of a major event in our area, we may be well faced with the same type of living situation. So don't discount the opportunity to take a look at their setups when you drive by sometime. Mass care duties and responsibilities. The city does support the following until outside additional resources arrive. And we already know that that may be some time. So the city supports emergency assistance, shelter, hydration, nourishment, medical, the distribution of emergency supplies, and the reunification of family members. And how that happens is up to the city and their emergency operations plan. What is emergency management? It's preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation, as outlined in the little graph over there on the left. As the chief pointed out earlier, the photo of the Emergency Operations Center is certainly not reminiscent or not specific to our community. We wouldn't need nor have the space for anything that significant, that large, but I think you get the concept. The concept is a place where people can assemble and make decisions and pass that information out to the community and obtain information from the surrounding communities as well. So the city of Manzanita will follow their new emergency operations plan. That plan was a concerted effort on the parts of a couple of city officials, on some city staff, and on my predecessor, Peter Nunn, with EVC, to develop a plan for the city. It just was effective on the 3rd of June of this last year, 2020. And my understanding is, although he has refused to acknowledge, but my understanding is that Councilor Nuttall actually wrote the emergency operation plan, and hats off. It's a 69-page document that is full of really comprehensive and most helpful information when it comes to getting a community together and being able to prepare for those that are affected. The emergency hub, M-Hub, when fully developed and activated, will, and this is in the emergency operation plan, it will serve as a primary resource for all emergency events. It will serve the emergency needs of the city. It will be a focal point of delivery of emergency services, the needs to residents, homeowners, and visitors. And I think it's important to point out the word visitors there. There's been some concern amongst some of the citizenry, I've heard it before, expressed that, well, why do we have to take care of them? Well, it's not only moral and ethical, it's also a requirement. It's a government requirement that anybody that's here falls under the care, concern, and consideration from the local government. So that M-Hub, Manzanita Emergency Hub, is going to act as an EOC. It will provide administrative services for our immediate area, and also taking in information from other EOCs. It will provide logistics, figuring out how things are going to function and where they're going to go and how they get there. It will be a planning arm. Planning for these events is critical, and during and after an event, even more so. It'll be a communication hub, an opportunity again to share with outside EOCs, as well as take information in and disseminate it amongst the community. They'll also be providing capabilities assessment, i.e. determine how best to move forward after an event. Manzanita Hub will be limited to government personnel and volunteers as activated via ICS. The mayor already alluded to the fact he sure as heck didn't want to be there for 3 days in a row. I get that. But there may be some folks who have skill sets that would be helpful and valuable to the command, or excuse me, to the hub and to the leaders in the EOC that can help spell some folks who are worn out. So for support, the EVCNB, that is the Emergency Volunteer Corps of Nehalem Bay, for those of you that may not know, we offer support through partnering as an advisory to the city, preparing the community through education and information sharing. We also perform detailed studies and share that information with the local governments. We provide proof of concept and recommendations. And I will be, again, I think Layla has offered me to come back next month and talk about some recommendations for some emergency supplies and equipment for the local community here for Manzanita. We're also reviewing needs as a team. An example of that was the emergency operation plan, working in an active role with the city, with the community. We're also a conduit for Oregon Emergency Management and DOGAMI. DOGAMI is the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. They are an arm of emergency management, and they deal with specifically seismology and the results of impending disasters. They're a terrific organization, but it's really difficult for anyone in city government to keep track of all this stuff. That's a role that we play. I've facilitated a couple of documents to our new city manager, to Layla Amon, and she's happily received them, and I imagine eventually she'll hook up with all these various resources that are out there to the benefit of the community. But for right now, anything I see that I think might be helpful, beneficial to her and the city, I'm offering that. So a recent study from DOGAMI, and by the way, this is on the EVCNB website. If you go to evcnb.org, there's a link to the study, and it was the effects of a 9.2 Cascadia event. There's mapping that gives everyone an opportunity to figure out how long it's going to take them to get from point A to point B, i.e. a place of refuge. So I was really thrilled to get this because these numbers they're very impactful, but they've reduced in volume the numbers of injuries and deaths from a study they did a couple of years ago. So I want to be clear, I'm not advocating that this is the right numbers, but these people are well versed in what they do, and I think that it's a reasonable assumption on their part based on studies. 101 injuries for Manzanita, 40 deaths. Expected number of displaced people, this is just in Manzanita, 481 permanent displacements resulting from a 9.2 Cascadia event. 4,109 temporary. And you say, well, how can that be? There's only 600 people that live here full time. What they did is when they did this study, they took into account high season and low season, i.e. summer and winter, and they took the median of both of those. So basically these are spring, fall numbers and the likely number of temporarily displaced people. Now, some of those people were probably living in tents and tents and RVs down at the state park. So real first responders on the left and folks that can assist initially before the first responders are able to get there with first aid and perhaps some triage. So how do the non-governmental organizations get activated? If you think of that earlier Cascadia scenario, the local governments and first responders are overwhelmed. The chief already alluded to him needing boots on the ground the first day, and there they are. And the certs would fulfill some of those roles. City and county can activate EVCNB for support. EVCNB provides trained volunteers, certs and MRC, and the crisis effect is lessened with additional help. So moving on to the proof of concept, the process that we've gone through as an organization is to identify a need. And I'm going to use the example of sheltering. Sheltering is a definite need, right? But what type of sheltering? So we've taken the time to research different opportunities for soft-sided shelters, but they have to be functional, durable. They have to have a long, useful life. They must be easily deployable. And what are the storage requirements? How much room are we going to have to take up to store this stuff? How much does it cost, finally? And then back to drill, 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 practice, practice, practice. So this is a recent purchase by the Emergency Volunteer Corps, and we are drilling with that now. This is a canvas wall tent that will accommodate easily 18 people to sleep, and it's waterproof. It's got an internal frame. It's simple to put up, and we've been exercising that over the last 2 months, and we hope to be doing some more drills with that. And eventually, according to the Director of Public Works, his plan is that the city of Manzanita may purchase this from us to have available as a shelter. I'm going to leave you with this, with a quick story. This is from the earthquake in New Zealand in 2016. Kaikoura is an East Coast town on the South Island. It's located about 105 miles north of Christchurch. Has an estimated permanent population of 2,400, so 4 times the size of Manzanita. The infrastructure was heavily damaged in this 2016 earthquake, and the bay and surrounding region were uplifted by as much as 7 feet. And by the way, DOGAMI tells us that our beach out here, our coast, is likely to drop by as much as 3 or 4 meters. That doesn't mean the ocean, that means the beach. That means surrounding land near the ocean. So aftershocks continued to rattle New Zealand for weeks, and up to 100,000 landslides hampered rescue efforts following the 7.8 magnitude earthquake. According to New Zealand's official source of geological hazard information, there were somewhere between 80,000 and 100,000 landslides following the quake, with many roads closed indefinitely. The town of Kaikoura was completely cut off from the rest of the country by landslides, prompting a mass evacuation that began the day following the quake. According to AP, New Zealand sent military helicopters and 2 Navy ships to rescue 1,000 tourists and hundreds of residents who were stranded in the town. Some 200 tourists were rescued within 2 days, but it took nearly a week to remove the remaining residents of the town. The earthquake only killed 2 people and triggered a small tsunami. So I think the last comment here on this is that Kaikoura was essentially isolated, but according to the air commander, Darren Webb, there's a real imperative to support the town because it can't support itself. Now, I want you to just think for a minute about the different scenario from what I posed earlier with Cascadia and what happened in New Zealand. What happened in New Zealand was a very local event. The way that their faults run, they tend to produce less damage regionally, and it's more local. So just a completely different scenario. While we're likely to suffer immense loss, and particularly property, theirs was more local and not as involved. So with that, I thank you and